All right, well, let's turn our Bibles to Genesis 27. Genesis 27. Continuing through the book of Genesis today. Genesis 27. A reminder from one of our past lessons, and that is one of the biggest factors that causes stress in our hearts and conflict in our lives is the refusal to accept missionary Amy Carmichael's advice. Anybody remember what that advice is? In acceptance lieth peace. That is right. What we're going to see as we come to chapter 27 is that a failure to heed this advice is going to be carried out in real time. We'll look back as a way of review to Genesis 25:28. Genesis 25:28. We see here, and Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. And so we see here a problem, and that problem is the parents are playing favorites. And we're going to see that played out in chapter 27. Also, we go back a few verses to verse number 23. If you remember, Rebekah had the two boys struggling in her womb. And it says here, and the Lord said to her, 2 nations are in thy womb, 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. This is the word of the Lord. The elder shall serve the younger. And so Isaac had a lot of good qualities. We've just talked about him digging those wells, and how when his enemies would fill in a well, he'd just dig another one. He seemed to live by that proverb over in Romans, which says, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. And so he sought to live at peace. And so there were a lot of good qualities about Isaac. But one of the things we see here is God had spoken that the younger son, Jacob, was going to be over the older son, Esau. And yet what did Isaac do? He tried to thwart God's will by putting the blessing of the firstborn upon his oldest son, Esau, instead. And so in acceptance lieth peace. When we accept the word of the Lord and we accept what God has said, we have peace. But when we try to go against what God has said, then we have conflict and stress and things like that. So verse number 1 of chapter 27 through verse 4. And it came to pass that when Isaac was old and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son and said unto him, My son. And he said unto him, Behold, here am I. And he said, Behold, now I am old. I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field and take me some venison, and make me savory meat such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. So how old is Isaac here? He is 137 years old. And Isaac calls in his firstborn son Esau to, number 1, go kill him some deer so he can have some good meat to eat. And then number 2, to receive the family blessing that is only reserved for the firstborn son. And so we see here, interestingly, the order, and that is, give me my food, I want to eat, and then I will bless you. And so it is interesting that Isaac, it must not have been they said the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, right? And so we see here that Isaac is saying, go get me a deer, fix it like you always fix it, Esau, and then I will bless you. So, what in the world? God had decreed that Jacob and not Esau would receive this blessing. We mentioned that in chapter 25, verse 23. If you remember in chapter 25, verses 31 through 34, Esau had sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of soup. And then we see in chapter 26, verses 34 and 35, that Esau went and married pagan wives. And so there's all these things that I'm sure Isaac was aware of, and yet in spite of all these things, he was going to bless Esau instead of Jacob. When we refuse to accept what God has decreed, it causes stress in our hearts and conflict in our lives. So we go to verses 5 through 10. And Rebekah heard when Isaac spake to Esau his son. And Esau went to the field to hunt for venison and bring it. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, Behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, Bring me venison and make me savory meat, that I may eat and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock and fetch me from thence 2 good kids of the goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, and that he may bless thee before his death. So Rebekah overheard what Isaac was planning to do. And she encouraged her son Jacob to trick his father Isaac into speaking the blessing over him instead of over her son Jacob, to get his father Isaac to speak the blessing over him instead of his brother Esau. So all these names are coming together here. But was that Rebekah's place? You know, Rebekah was supposed to be under the authority of her husband, and if her husband was going to bless Esau instead of Jacob, then that's something she should have left in God's hands and not tried to take it into her own hands, especially when she's trying to deceive her husband. And so we see here Isaac, in spite of the fact that God had said Jacob was going to be the blessed son, that he was going to take the place of the firstborn son, Isaac says, no, I'm going to bless Esau. We see Rebekah, in spite of the fact that she is called to submit to her husband Isaac, we see Rebekah saying, no, I will not submit. I'm going to trick my husband Isaac into giving the blessing to Jacob. And she may have even been self-righteous about it and said, why, that's what God said, and if my husband isn't going to listen to God, then I am. But what is it that Bob Jones Sr. said? He said, it's never right to do wrong, to get a chance to do right. And so once again, this truth we see here in this family dynamic. When we refuse to accept what God has decreed, it causes stress in our hearts and conflict in our lives. So verses 11 and 12, Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, Behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father perhaps will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver. And I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. Jacob objected to his mother's plan, not because Jacob, whose name means heel grabber, which is a phrase or a term for one who is a trickster, one who is a supplanter. Jacob objected because he was hairy. He was not hairy. And perhaps his father will feel me, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me and not a blessing. Seem to him to be a deceiver. Guess what, Jacob? You are a deceiver. You're trying to deceive your dad. But yet what was he concerned about? He was concerned about seeming to be a deceiver. At this point in his life, he was not a child of God. And at this point in his life, he was more concerned about keeping up appearances than he was about doing right. And that was wrong. But verse 13, and his mother said unto him, Upon me be thy curse, my son. Only obey my voice and go fetch me them. So Rebekah takes full responsibility, and she even offers to bear any curse that might come upon Jacob because of his deed. Any thoughts or any questions as we come up to this verse number 13? Yes, Heather?
It seemed like the same struggle that Esau faced with food, his father did as well. And the same thing that Jacob struggled with deceiving his father did as well.
That is just a wonderful insight there. You know, that's a great point. And that is that Isaac favored Esau and Rebekah favored Jacob. And the point that the lady was making back there is that Isaac, he really had something for food. He really loved food. And food was the downfall of his son Esau because he sold his birthright for a mess of pottage, for a bowl of soup, lentil soup, red soup. And in the same way, Rebekah, it seems like her downfall was being a deceiver. And guess what? Her favorite son, Jacob, inherited her weakness or whatever for deceiving. And so that's a great, great observation there. So it's once again, it's a challenge to those of us who are parents. You know, the sins that are in our lives are very likely to be passed down to our children. And so we need to try to get rid of those sins in our own lives so they don't inherit our bad qualities. So that's good. Anything else? Observations? All right, verse number 14 through 17. And he went, that's Jacob, and fetched, and brought them to his mother, and his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, and upon the smooth of his neck. And she gave the savory meat and the bread which she had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. And so Jacob did as his mother told him. He fetched him a goat, and Rebekah cooked it. Rebekah put Esau's clothes upon Jacob, and she put the skins of the goats upon his arms. With meat in hand, Jacob was about to go in to his father. Jacob is living up to his name: heel grabber, deceiver, supplanter. So once again, the theme of this lesson is, when we refuse to accept what God has decreed, it causes stress in our hearts and conflict in our lives. So what is going to happen when Jacob goes in to see his father? And that's what we're going to see here right now. Verse 18. And Jacob came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I. Who art thou, my son? Very straightforward question. Isaac had doubts, did he not? Who art thou? Who are you? You know, this was the last chance before Jacob took the plunge and changed the course of his family's history. This is it. Jacob could have said, I'm Jacob. I'm Jacob. And you remember, Dad, that God decreed that I should receive the blessing. And so I am in here to receive the blessing. He could have done a lot of things. And in our own lives, there are moments, and God, I think, allows us to reflect in those moments before we take the plunge into sin, where God has given us another chance, one last chance, to change the course, to change the trajectory. What's going to happen in these next few verses is going to change everything. It's going to make Esau angry with Jacob. It's going to cause Rebekah to lose her favorite son. He's going to have to run off. And it's going to cause all kind of conflict and problems. But this is the moment that it's all been working itself up to. So what is Jacob going to do? I always liked, when I was a kid, those choose your own adventure books. They were so neat. And so he's got to choose. I'm honest, and I say I'm Jacob, your second-born son. I'm here for the blessing that God has promised me. Or he's going to continue in his deceit and say, I am Esau. Well, let's see. I know we're all on the edge of our seats, what Jacob's going to do. Verse 19 and 20. And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, thy firstborn. I have done according as thou badest me. Arise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac said unto his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. So as I look at verses 19 and 20, I see, and I come up with 4 lies that Jacob tells his father in these 2 verses. Who can tell me what these lies are by quoting the scripture back to me? Okay, I am Esau, thy firstborn. That's one of the lies. What else? I have done according as thou badest me. That's right. What else? Yes, eat of my venison. He even lied about what the meat was. It was goat meat. And how about the 4th lie?
He blames God for bringing it to him.
Yes, for the Lord thy God brought it to me. And that one's the worst, in my opinion, because that is using God's name in vain. We use God's name in vain when we are not talking to God and we use it, or we're not praising God and we use it, or we're not sharing God's message with others and using it. And so he was outright lying that God was the one who had brought this deer to him. Number 1, it wasn't a deer. And number 2, it was his lion mother who had made up that goat meat. So what does God think about lying? Let's just pause and look at that this morning. Proverbs chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. Maybe someone here is being tempted to lie, and we want to see what happens when we lie. Proverbs 6, beginning in verse 16 through verse number 19. It says, These 6 things doth the Lord hate, yea, 7 are an abomination unto him. A proud look. What's the next one? A lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, and heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, feet that be swift in running to mischief. Whoa, it's mentioned twice. A false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. God hates lying so much that in this list of abominable sins, it is mentioned not once, but it's mentioned twice. Look at Proverbs chapter 12. This is an interesting one here as I was looking up verses that deal with lying. Proverbs 12, beginning verse 17, going through verse 22. He that speaketh truth showeth forth righteousness, but a false witness deceit. There is as speaketh like the piercings of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is health. The lip of truth shall be established forever, but a lying tongue is but for a moment. Deceit is in the heart of those them that imagine evil, but to the counselors of peace is joy. There shall no evil happen to the just, but the wicked shall be filled with mischief. Lying lips are abomination to the Lord, but they that deal truly are his delight. And one of the things that I found interesting in verse 19, it says, a lying tongue is but for a moment. And that is, if you tell a lie, it only helps you right now. So you tell a lie, you may be able to get out of a situation right now, but it only helps you right then. And I like what someone has said, when you tell a lie, you have to tell another lie to cover that up, and another lie to cover that up. And finally, at the end of all these lies, what does the Bible say? Be sure your sin will find you out. And it may not find you out by discovering that you have lied, but it may find you out in another way, which is more insidious, which is the type of life that you have to lead is going to be negatively affected by the fact that you're just full of lies. Your life is built upon lies. And so I thought that was interesting. A lying tongue is but for a moment. It only helps you right now. It doesn't help you long term. But then that powerful verse, number 22, God says, lying lips are abomination to the Lord. An abomination is something that God hates and something he's going to judge. And so you don't want to tell lies. Proverbs 13:5 says, a righteous man hateth lying, but a wicked man is loathsome and cometh to shame. Proverbs 21:6, the getting of treasures by a lying tongue is a vanity tossed to and fro of them that seek death. You lie in order to help yourself out financially, then guess what? It is something that is done by those who seek death. In Revelation 21:8, but the fearful and unbelieving, and the abominable and whoremongers and sorcerers and idolaters, and all liars shall have their part in the lake which burneth with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. And so we see here these lies were not insignificant. They were something that God hated. God had decreed that the younger, Jacob, would be over the elder, Esau. If God decrees something, then he can work that thing out without you using lies and deceit in order to bring about God's plan. And so, going back to our text, Genesis 27, verse number 21 through 27. And Isaac said unto Jacob, come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee, my son, whether thou be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him, and said, the voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, because his hands were hairy, as his brother Esau's hands, so he blessed him. And he said, art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. And he said, bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's venison, that my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near to him, and he did eat. And he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said unto him, come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed his raiment, and blessed him, and said, see, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field, which the Lord hath blessed. Now, one of the things I notice in these verses is that Isaac relied upon his senses to determine if the man before him was Esau or not. We'll get to an incident at Joshua where the Gibeonites, is that their name? Gibeonites, yes. They came to Joshua and they had moldy bread and wore out clothes and all this sort of stuff. And they said, we come from a far country. And they failed to pray about it. They failed to inquire of the Lord. So they made a treaty with the Gibeonites, which really caused them immediately to go into a war that they could have avoided. And it was because they trusted their senses instead of trusting God and his word. And so, of the senses, there was one sense that told Isaac that this was Jacob standing before him. And what sense was that told him that it was Jacob? What's his hearing? That's right. Good job. Okay. There's another sense of Isaac that was already gone. And what sense was that? Sight. That's right. Good. So of the other senses, we see here which ones told him, this is Esau. Oh, he smelled him, right? That's right. Verse number 27. He smelled him and he said, ooh, you smell like the field. You smell like Esau. Okay. Didn't have any Old Spice back then. Okay. How about another sense that we see here that Isaac used? Huh? He felt him. So touch. Verses 22 and 23. Come near, let me feel you. See whether or not you're Esau. And just like stroking a cat. He stroked Esau, and it's like, ooh, this is Esau. It's hairy. And what's the other one? Verse number 25. Huh? Taste. Ooh, yes. Wow. This is definitely Esau's venison. Good food. So that probably was the most important, right? Okay. So, what do we learn from this? When we rely upon our senses and perceptions, we can be wrong. So we need to be careful of that. When we rely upon our senses and our perceptions, we can be wrong. So we need to be careful. Okay. Verses 28 and 29, we find the blessing. Therefore, God give thee of the dew of heaven and the fatness of the earth, plenty of corn and wine. Let people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren. Let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curseth thee, and blessed be he that blesseth thee. So we see here that this blessing on the firstborn went beyond the normal blessing of the firstborn. It sounds a lot like Genesis chapter 12, which was God's blessing upon Abraham in verses 2 and 3. Speaking of Abraham's descendants and his one descendant, which is Jesus, it says, I will make of thee a great nation. I will bless thee and make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curseth thee. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. And so what Isaac was doing here is he was extending the Abrahamic covenant and its blessings to Jacob. Now what's troubling to me here is, who does Isaac think he's blessing? Esau. So why is Isaac blessing Esau when he knows that Jacob is the one who's been prophesied by God's voice himself to rule over his older brother? This is a messed up situation. Nobody is trusting in God's ability to carry out his decrees. So, verse number 30. And it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made an end of blessing Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out from the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. So if this was a play, as we have the set for the Christmas play behind me here, we would have Jacob exiting stage right, and we would have Isaac entering stage left. So what is going to happen? Not Isaac, Esau. I've got these names messed up on here. I don't know. Esau. So Jacob is exiting stage right. Isaac is in the middle of the stage, center stage, and Esau is entering stage left. What is going to happen? And we will find out next time we come back to the book of Genesis.